Late March 2026, the Myanmar military holds its 81st Armed Forces Day parade in the fortress capital of Naypyidaw. Columns of soldiers march in perfect lockstep beneath massive statues of ancient kings. It is a highly choreographed projection of stability. This pageantry is setting the stage for a major political maneuver. Senior General Aung Hlaing, the man who seized power in a 2021 coup, is preparing to shed his military uniform. A newly convened, military-dominated parliament is poised to install him as a civilian president. Step outside the capital, and that carefully crafted image disappears. The country is in the grip of a crippling fuel shortage. To keep major cities from grinding to a complete halt, the junta has resorted to extreme QR code rationing systems, limiting drivers to a single tank of gas per week. The formal economy is paralyzed, and the human toll is staggering. Nearly 16 million people, a third of the population, now require humanitarian aid. While the parliament convenes in Naypyidaw, military jets are dropping bombs on civilian trading hubs in regions like Magway. This 2026 democratic transition is an empty performance. It is a costume change by a weakened junta trying to secure international lifelines and mask its rapidly eroding grip on the country. To understand why this facade is being deployed, we have to look back to the late 1980s, when the military first codified the strategy they are still attempting to use today. In 1988, millions of citizens took to the streets to protest decades of economic ruin. The military response was absolute. They crushed the uprising with live ammunition, killing thousands, and established a new junta. 2 years later, they held a general election. When the pro-democracy opposition won in a landslide, the generals simply ignored the results. They spent the next 2 decades methodically hardwiring their authority into the very structure of the state. This seating chart of Myanmar's parliament illustrates the result. Under the 2008 constitution, 25% of all seats are permanently reserved for unelected military officers. Because constitutional change requires over 75% approval, this grants the army a mathematical veto over any legislation. Confident in this failsafe, the military allowed a temporary opening between 2011 and 2020. They permitted Aung San Suu Kyi and her National League for Democracy to win elections and form a government in a transition to civilian rule. Yet the military always kept its finger on the trigger. They retained control of key ministries and security forces. When the army launched a violent campaign against the Rohingya minority in 2017, driving hundreds of thousands from their homes, the civilian government was unable to intervene. The military's ultimate authority remained intact. On February 1, 2021, Senior General Aung Hlaing tore up that arrangement and seized total power. He expected a repeat of the 1988 outcome: arrest the leaders, disperse the protests, wait out international sanctions, and force public submission. But the populace refused to comply. Having lived through a decade of internet access and partial freedom, the protesters did not back down. When the military opened fire, peaceful demonstrations evolved into an armed rebellion, giving rise to local civilian militias known as People's Defense Forces. Then came a significant shift. These newly formed civilian militias allied with established ethnic armies that had been fighting the state for decades. In late 2023, this coalition launched coordinated offensives, most notably Operation 1027, and began capturing hundreds of military outposts and strategic border towns. This map visualizes the fallout. Just a few years ago, the military claimed authority over the entire nation. Today, their footprint has aggressively shrunk. Over 60% of Myanmar's territory is now contested or actively held by resistance forces. By 2021, the junta miscalculated the public's resolve, igniting a nationwide resistance that has pushed the military's traditional methods of control to a breaking point. Unable to maintain a ground presence across these vast territories, the military has radically shifted its tactics. By 2026, the junta is relying heavily on its one remaining advantage: air superiority. This retreat to the skies carries a horrific human cost. The military has authorized a massive spike in aerial bombardments aimed directly at civilian infrastructure. In 2025 alone, they bombed a general hospital in Rauk-U, killing dozens of patients and medical staff. On the ground, the formal military is facing severe attrition. Amid mass surrenders, the Tatmadaw was forced to implement a sweeping conscription law in 2024, dragging unwilling citizens into its ranks just to maintain its infantry formations. A government that drops bombs on its own economic hubs and drafts unwilling civilians into its ranks faces a deep, systemic crisis of legitimacy. Which brings us back to the sprawling parliamentary buildings of Naypyidaw in March 2026. The installation of a civilian government is a rebranding effort, built to appease international allies and secure economic lifelines for a military that can no longer fund itself. The generals can no longer rely on the same calculations that forced the country into submission back in 1988. Today's Myanmar is a fragmented reality. The state's sovereign control is largely restricted to its air power and a few isolated urban strongholds. This year's costume change is a facade for a fractured state, leaving Myanmar in a grueling, protracted fight for its future, one the generals are increasingly unable to control.